A few days ago, I experienced a mixture of relief and sadness. After discovering my wife's affair, I had installed cameras that confirmed my suspicions and ultimately helped me secure a favorable outcome in our divorce. While I was coming to terms with my new reality, a different situation unfolded at home that tugged at my heartstrings. My kids, eager and full of life, found a little bunny in our yard. They were so excited and begged me and my wife to let them keep it. The joy on their faces was undeniable, but I knew we couldn't keep a wild rabbit. We already had several pets, and a wild bunny would not be safe in our home. I gently explained to my kids that the bunny needed to go back to its family. They were sad, but after some coaxing, they agreed to return the bunny to where they found it. However, I was busy working from home and couldn't accompany them, so I asked my wife to take the bunny back. I suggested she let it go near the thorn bushes at the end of our property, which I believed was the safest spot, considering we lived in a rural area filled with natural predators. After I returned to my work, I thought everything was under control. A little while later, I heard my kids yelling and crying as they rushed back into the house, with my wife trailing behind them, trying to calm them down. I immediately asked what had happened, and my older child, with tears streaming down their face, told me that their mother made them let the bunny go right in the middle of the yard. To my horror, a hawk swooped down and took the bunny away before their eyes. The vivid description of the bunny's cries sent a wave of shock and anger through me. I was furious at my wife for not following my advice and ensuring the bunny's safe release. In our home, we always tried to support each other, but this time, it felt like my wife disregarded my concerns. She insisted that it was just a bunny, and that the kids would get over it eventually. I argued that it wasn't just about the bunny, it was about our children witnessing such a traumatic event. They were only 4 and 5 years old, and now they had to process the loss of a small creature in such a violent way. The sadness and disappointment in their eyes were heartbreaking. For days, both of our kids isolated themselves in their rooms, refusing to speak to their mother. When she attempted to reach out to them, they referred to her as the bunny killer. I had tried my best to mediate between my wife and the kids, but the tension remained thick. I was still upset, primarily with my wife for her poor decision-making. She, on the other hand, felt that I had not stood by her side when she needed my support. We ended up in an argument where I brought up past instances where she hadn't backed me up. In the heat of the moment, we both ended up upset, with her retreating to our room in tears. As I reflected on the situation, I wondered if I had made a mistake. A friend suggested I seek advice, and I understood the natural cycle of life, including that hawks need to eat as well. However, it didn't lessen my desire to shield my young children from such harsh realities. I grew up in the countryside, where I learned to release any small wild creatures in remote areas where they would have the best chance of survival. My wife, having grown up in the city, lacked that same experience. I want to clarify that I did not yell at my wife after the incident, merely voiced my disappointment. Our argument occurred in hushed tones to avoid alarming the kids. Also, I needed to stay close to my work phone, which is why I couldn't accompany them outside. I never called my wife the nickname our children started using in reference to her after the bunny incident. I found it demeaning and refused to stoop to that level. Additionally, it is important to note that when my children found the bunny, they were not unsupervised. My wife was present with them. They ran back to tell me about their find, and I had to emphasize the importance of returning the bunny to its home. It's frustrating to repeatedly clarify that this was not a situation copied from online videos. These events happen in real life, and sadly, hawks do hunt small animals all the time. Our property is mostly flat grassy land, which made the bunny vulnerable. I had mowed the grass just days before, leaving it short and making it easy for a hawk to spot the little creature. The whole experience felt like a tragic reminder of the circle of life, one that was too harsh for my young children to witness. Hawks are constantly flying overhead, a common sight in my area. Since childhood, I have been in a constant struggle against these birds of prey, especially when it comes to protecting baby chicks. Armed with my old pellet gun, I would keep watch over the little ones, knowing that hawks have a knack for snatching them up. Small bunnies are equally tempting targets for these predators, which is why I urged my wife to let the bunny go in the bushes rather than in the open yard. This precaution was intended to provide the bunny with a safe hiding spot. I am thoroughly frustrated with the attitude of some people who say, hawks have to eat too, or talk about the so-called circle of life. Growing up, I learned the hard way that farmers, including my grandparents, have every right to defend their animals from predators like hawks. We simply couldn't allow these birds to swoop in every day and take all the baby chicks they desired. I spent countless hours outside, pellet gun in hand, not because I wanted to harm the hawks, but to deter them. I never actually shot one down, although I did manage to hit a few, which only made them fly away temporarily. It's been over 25 years since I last aimed a pellet gun at a hawk. I never found joy in harming any living creature. My grandfather, however, was the one wielding real guns to take down hawks and coyotes threatening our farm. My childhood experiences instilled in me a deep understanding of hawks and their hunting habits. Although hawks can easily find food in our region, they remain opportunistic hunters, ready to take advantage of any vulnerable animal around. Recently, I faced a situation involving a bunny that my wife decided to release in the middle of our yard. I had advised her to let the kids take the bunny to the bushes for a safer release. Unfortunately, a hawk took the bunny right in front of our young children, ages 4 and 5. The sight was shocking and upsetting, leading to a moment of chaos as our kids ran back to me in tears, calling their mother the Bunny Slaughter. This nickname stuck, especially after the whole incident unfolded. Now, I am in a different place in my life. I recently completed a divorce, and what I have to share next is more complicated. I had shared my thoughts on Reddit about the bunny incident, which angered my wife. This led to a significant argument between us, and I received the silent treatment for a week after that. My intention had always been to guide our children toward treating their mother with kindness, even after the bunny situation, but the nickname resurfaced whenever they were upset with her. After a couple of weeks, my wife softened her stance. She acknowledged that she should have listened to my advice about the bunny. She explained that her defensive reaction was rooted in a desire not to appear wrong. I accepted her apology and offered my own for posting on Reddit, hoping we could seek marriage counseling together. Unfortunately, she refused, insisting that there was nothing wrong in our marriage. I didn't want to push the issue, especially since things seemed to improve for a while. However, a few weeks later, my eldest daughter approached me with something troubling. She wanted to tell me that there was more to her anger toward her mother than just the bunny incident. Although she was scared to speak up, I reassured her that she could share anything with me. What she revealed took me completely by surprise and shifted everything in our family. She disclosed that for several months, my wife had been bringing another man over to our home on Saturdays while I was at work, referring to him as her special friend. She had kept this a secret through various means of bribery, but my daughter felt something was wrong and gathered the courage to tell me. It's important to recognize that children are observant and aware of their surroundings. They pick up on things quickly. I had sensed some issues myself, but hearing this confirmed my suspicions and changed the situation dramatically. I started to notice that my wife had been acting differently recently. Her attitude seemed a bit off, and she had become shorter with everyone, especially with our kids. Concerned, I tried to talk to her about it. One day, as I was excited to share my first blog post with her, she exploded in anger. She lashed out at me, picking apart everything she could think of. She insulted my appearance, my character, and even my habits. To my shock, she even brought up the fact that I used to smoke, something I had given up over 10 years ago. Things escalated further when she resorted to locking me out of our bedroom. I could hear her crying so loudly that it echoed throughout the house. It was heartbreaking and confusing. Then, when our eldest child came to me, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I started to piece together the troubling signs, and the realization struck me: my wife might be cheating. Her mood swings seemed similar to those she had during her pregnancies, but in this case, they felt more intense. After researching online and speaking with friends as well as a counselor, I learned that her behavior could be linked not only to hormonal changes but also to the guilt and deception of infidelity. While I don't claim to be a psychology expert, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to align perfectly. I desperately hoped it was just a misunderstanding. To find the truth, I made a difficult decision. I ordered hidden cameras and had them sent to my workplace to avoid raising suspicion at home. Once they arrived, I discreetly set them up while my wife was out for a night with her friends. Connecting them to the Wi-Fi was straightforward, and in just a few hours, I was able to watch every corner of our home from my computer, whether I was at work or at home. Initially, I hesitated, wondering if I was going too far. What if I discovered I was wrong? I could easily remove the cameras without anyone ever knowing. Unfortunately, my worst fears came true. Within the first week, I collected more than enough evidence to confirm my suspicions. The man my wife was seeing was an acquaintance from her former job, a former colleague who had worked closely with her. I remembered him well, as they always seemed to share a special bond during social gatherings. Years ago, my wife had chosen to leave her job to become a full-time mother after we had our first child. It had been a mutual decision, one we both agreed upon. Although she had kept in touch with her old co-workers, the connection had faded significantly. What I uncovered about her relationship with this younger man shocked me deeply. He was almost a decade younger than her, and she had mentored him when he was taking over her position. Now, both my wife and I are over 40, but she still looked stunning. Many people mistook her for being in her 20s, and I suspect she was leveraging that youthful appearance. Feeling devastated and needing someone to confide in, I turned to my sister. I shared the footage I had recorded from the nanny cams, and to my relief, she had suspected foul play as well. In fact, she revealed that she had seen my wife getting too cozy with another man at a local bar. While nothing overtly inappropriate occurred, there were certainly moments of intimate touching that raised red flags for her, and she hadn't told me sooner out of uncertainty. As my feelings of betrayal grew, I decided to take further steps. I ordered a GPS tracker and discreetly placed it in the trunk of my wife's car while at work. With my sister and her husband's assistance, we decided to follow the tracker during my wife's next outing with friends. To my shock, she did not go where she claimed she would. Instead, she drove 20 miles further away to a location completely different from her usual spot, where she was meeting up with the man I had come to know as her affair partner. My sister and brother-in-law kept watch from their car and observed them for a while. They noted how he kept rubbing her belly during their conversation, capturing video evidence of this surprising behavior. Seeing the footage was a crushing blow. It strongly implied that she might be pregnant with his child. Considering her erratic behavior at home, I became overwhelmed with emotion. My sister and her husband had to calm me down, as I felt like I was losing control. I found myself reaching for alcohol, desperate to escape the pain, but my sister wisely advised against it. Eventually, I made the decision to take a leave of absence from work. I told my wife that I had to go on a business trip. She seemed overjoyed at the idea, and it was painfully obvious she was thrilled I would be away from home for a while. I felt a strange mix of excitement and relief that I would be leaving for a while. As I tried to process the situation, I couldn't help but wonder about the woman I was married to for nearly 2 decades. Who was she now? She was certainly not the same person I fell in love with so many years ago. It was as if someone had come in and taken her place. I started to think, could she possibly be an alien, like something out of a science fiction story? Did I ever really know her at all? The more I thought about these questions, the more confusing everything became. It seemed pointless to try to make sense of it all. I had set up cameras all over the house to gather evidence, and my sister and brother-in-law agreed to take care of my kids for a few days. They were thrilled to visit their auntie and uncle in the city, which was perfect for my plans. With the kids away, my wife had the opportunity she had been waiting for. Just a couple of hours after I left, she called her affair partner, AP, and he showed up that evening to stay the night. I won't go into the intimate details of what went on between them in my home, you can imagine it for yourself. What made it even worse was how they joked about me while doing all of this. They talked openly about having a baby and how they needed to figure things out before her belly started to show. She was already over 3 months along by that time, and there was no way for her to pass it off as my child. The truth was clear, AP belonged to a different race, making it obvious that the baby could never be mine. While AP voiced his worries about the situation, my wife simply brushed them aside. She assured him that they had plenty of time to figure it all out. Then, without any hint of guilt, she let slip that this wasn't even her first affair. She confessed to having been with another man when she was 29. She told AP she was tired of playing the role of the perfect housewife and felt stifled by my boring presence. If it hadn't been for my financial stability, she claimed that she would have left me a long time ago. When AP asked her about our kids, her response was chilling, "He can have them." It was clear she didn't want to be a part of their lives anymore, likely because she believed they liked me better. Besides, she was about to start a new chapter in her life with her do-over baby. I was so disgusted that I almost threw my laptop across the room in my motel. Instead, I managed to contain my anger. I grabbed a few beers from a six-pack, had dinner at a local diner, and watched a movie to distract myself. But later, lying in bed, my mind spiraled with thoughts until I finally drifted off to sleep. I had thought I understood my wife completely, I loved her wholeheartedly and would have given her everything I had. However, it became painfully clear that some people hide their true selves, and it's only when they choose to reveal it that you can see the darkness inside. In that moment of realization, I made a firm decision, I would destroy her in the divorce. Despite generally being a very kind and calm person, I recognized that my anger had the potential to transform me into her worst nightmare. The next day, I sought out a law firm to find the most ruthless divorce lawyer available. Living in a state where fault matters in divorce cases, I knew my wife was already in deep trouble with her affair caught on camera. Initially, the lawyer seemed hesitant about taking me on so quickly. However, once I elaborated on my situation and showed him the video evidence, he lit up with a devilish grin. We shook hands, and he declared he would get to work immediately, excited to dig into a case like this. A few weeks later, I had my wife served with divorce papers while I was working from home and our kids were at school. The papers were delivered right into her hands by a local sheriff. The cameras captured the entire scene. She opened the envelope, read the contents, and her face fell. Fear and panic took over her expression as she bolted into my office to confront me. I remained calm, fully checked out of our marriage. When she tried to argue, I simply reiterated my decision to have her leave our home. She shouted that I couldn't do this to her and even threatened to accuse me of abuse to get me fired from my job. I simply told her to go ahead and spread any lies she wanted. I wasn't worried. After all, the truth was on my side. She had clearly been planning to betray me for a while, especially since she was pregnant with the baby of her affair partner. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with surprise, and she asked how much I knew about what was happening. I simply replied that I knew enough to understand the situation. I told her again that I wanted her to leave our home, but she refused. She insisted that the house belonged to her just as much as it belonged to me. In a defiant move, she locked herself in the bedroom, trying to shut me out. From the bedroom cameras, I could see her having a breakdown. It was alarming to watch her panic, yet there was a strange, almost triumphant smile on her face while she frantically called the police. She was quite the actress, and if I hadn't known her history of deceit, I might have believed her performance over the phone without a second thought. I waited for the police to arrive with the front door wide open, ready to show them the truth. When the officers arrived, they were eager for a confrontation, ready to take immediate action. However, the house was spotless. There were no signs of a fight. Just then, my wife burst out of the bedroom, crying and grabbing one of the officers' vests, claiming I was a maniac. I quickly asked another officer if I could show them the real story. He agreed, which visibly startled my wife, as she was unaware that I had been recording her actions. I pulled out my laptop and showed the officer the footage from the cameras. It clearly depicted my wife saying she would make things up to ruin my life. We watched as she ran out of my office and down the hall to the master bedroom, then the footage of her calling the police and lying about me began to play. I had recorded everything from multiple angles. While she insisted to the police that I had harmed her, the recordings revealed a completely different narrative. I handed the police a thumb drive that contained all the video evidence needed to demonstrate that she had called them under false pretenses. Despite the overwhelming evidence, my wife clung to her lie, claiming I was an abuser. She even attempted to argue that the recordings were illegal and could not be used. I calmly explained that the recordings were perfectly legal since they came from security cameras installed in my own home, not from a public space. In that moment, my wife turned to the police and demanded they take action, but it was she who ended up being handcuffed. As they led her away, she started crying like a child, which left me shaking my head in disbelief. This was the woman I had loved for so many years, someone I once thought was intelligent and kind. I was clearly mistaken. As the officers took her, she shouted that they couldn't do this to her, but she didn't fight back. If she had, it would have led to more charges against her. Once they left with her, I made sure to shut down all her credit cards that were under my name and stopped any payments to our joint account. She would be forced to rely on her own money to bail herself out. Over the years, she had saved a good amount while I took care of the mortgage solely in my name, so she wasn't financially stranded. When she returned for her car, I had already packed a few of her suitcases with her clothes and other belongings and left the keys on the seat. She wouldn't even be able to step back into the house. A day later, her parents came to speak with me. At first, they only knew the twisted version of the story she had told them, which was similar to what she had said to the police. Her father, despite his age, was large and imposing, ready to confront me. However, when I asked him if he knew anything about my wife's affair or her pregnancy, he looked surprised, giving me the chance to explain everything. I opened my laptop once more to show my in-laws the recordings. When they saw the truth, their faces changed from disbelief to disgust. They couldn't believe that this person was their daughter. They apologized to me, promising to stay in touch to help with my children. In a bold move, they called my wife on speakerphone right in front of me to confront her about the situation. The moment I confronted her about the lies she had been telling, things started to escalate quickly. Instead of admitting her wrongdoing, she attempted to double down, insisting that everything was fine. However, the truth became undeniable when my in-laws revealed that they had been present during the situation and had seen all the recordings. They were fully aware of everything that had transpired and were adamant that she needed to leave their house immediately. In a desperate attempt to save face, she tried to backtrack on her earlier statements. But my in-laws stood their ground, letting her know that they did not raise her to be selfish or deceitful. They made it clear that they could not accept someone who would betray her own husband and try to frame him for something he didn't do. Right then and there, they disowned her, telling her over the phone that she was no longer their daughter. They hung up the phone before she could say anything else. She attempted to call them back repeatedly, but her efforts were met with silence as they chose to ignore her. When my in-laws returned home, they found that not only was their daughter gone, but she had also wreaked havoc in their house, destroying several items that held sentimental value. My mother-in-law was heartbroken, tears streaming down her face as she took in the chaos left behind. Despite all that had happened, I still consider my ex-in-laws my in-laws, as they continue to drop by occasionally to visit their grandchildren. In stark contrast, my ex-wife has effectively been cut out of our lives. Later, she returned with her affair partner to gather her belongings. The affair partner chose to wait outside, unwilling to enter the house, while my wife remained silent, refusing to communicate with me as she packed her remaining things. She was fully aware that cameras were recording, and any more outbursts on her part would only harm her position further. I wasn't alone during this chaotic time. My sister and brother-in-law were there to help, especially as my brother-in-law kept a watchful eye on the affair partner from the window. When our children arrived home from school, my wife continued to ignore them, even as our youngest cried for her attention. It was painful to witness. In a moment of anger, she took a few cherished wedding photos off the wall and threw them to the ground, seemingly hoping for a reaction from me. However, I remained silent, and she ultimately took her last few bags and walked out the door. After her departure, I realized I needed help taking care of the kids. I called my elderly mother to come and stay with me for a while, as I was struggling to manage everything on my own while balancing work and childcare. Additionally, the stress led me to order DNA tests for my kids. I had every reason to believe they were mine, but I wanted to be absolutely sure. Thankfully, the tests confirmed that both children were indeed mine. I also took the precaution of getting tested for STIs and found that I was clean, which alleviated some of my worries. About a week later, my wife showed up at my door again, this time with a proposal for a clean divorce. She suggested that if I agreed to this arrangement, she would get half of everything we owned. I stood firm and refused to give in to her demands. During our heated exchange, she fairly admitted that she had learned the laws in our state were not in her favor. We had built our lives together here, and there was no way she could escape facing the consequences of her actions. I reminded her of the betrayal, how she had hurt me, our children, her parents, and practically everyone in our lives by having an affair. Frustrated, I slammed the door in her face. She left quietly, and I did not see her again until the divorce court session a few months later. By then, she was visibly pregnant and had hired a lawyer, while her affair partner was nowhere to be found. In court, I anticipated that she would attempt to lie to the judge, which she did on a few occasions. However, I had amassed enough video evidence to counter any fabrications, so her chances of success were slim. Rather than be straightforward, she resorted to dragging out the divorce process, making unreasonable demands, such as wanting a large portion of my savings and various items I owned. She even insisted that I buy her half of the house, despite never contributing financially toward it. On my end, I was focused on securing full custody of the children and removing her name from the house deed. I had video proof demonstrating her lack of concern for our children and her willingness to create lies. My wife attempted to stall the proceedings and constantly changed her demands, but the judge was not willing to let her drag things out. Being in an at-fault state meant that she was entitled to very little, especially since she was the one who had committed adultery. Her attempt to frame me only made her case worse, and the judicial process continued to move forward. Her attempts to frame me only served to worsen her situation significantly. In the end, she lost all custody of our children and left the divorce with nothing more than her personal belongings. Considering the circumstances, I felt the financial settlement was fair. I had previously purchased a car for her, which was in my name. However, I signed the title over to her without hesitation as part of the agreement. Throughout the divorce, she showed no interest in speaking to our kids, which ultimately led to me gaining full custody. The house is now completely mine, and I finally feel free from my ex-wife. Despite her efforts to maintain her lies and manipulate others, the truth eventually came out. My sister made sure to share information about my wife's infidelity with those who knew us, and soon, our mutual friends realized who was really telling the truth. As a result, they distanced themselves from her. After the divorce was finalized, my ex-wife and her affair partner left town together. I heard that her affair partner was not fired from his job, but rather transferred. The specifics of their new location do not concern me, I am simply relieved that they are no longer in my life. It does not matter to me where they ended up. I hope my ex has managed to start a family with someone else and that it was worth the choices she made. This is not what I expected to share on Reddit. Just recently, I was discussing a simpler matter involving my wife releasing a bunny into an area where a hawk could easily catch it. Reflecting on the comments I received regarding my wife's behavior made me realize that I should have recognized the signs long before this. I had kept my perspective clouded with false hope throughout our marriage, but now it has all come to an end. I appreciate those who took the time to read through my story. I know it was lengthy and detailed, but this is a significant part of my life. After the divorce, I also made sure to remove my ex's name from the house deed. The bank records clearly showed that I had been the only one paying for it. My ex was frequently argumentative in court, and considering we were in a state where fault matters, her confirmed cheating did not help her case. It was as if her actions had signed a document against her in court. I hired the toughest lawyer I could find, a man who was both fierce and relentless. In the end, my ex received a payout of $60,000 as part of the settlement, along with the car I had purchased for her a couple of years earlier, which cost me $50,000. That car was fully paid off, and I transferred the title to her as part of the agreement. Even though she was offered partial custody of our children, she chose to relinquish all rights to them when a video of her expressing indifference toward them surfaced. Realizing that she could not have things her way, she willingly walked away. For those who might think the police would not take my ex's false claims seriously, think again. The police in our area are known to take such matters seriously. My ex, with a manipulative smile, attempted to accuse me of being abusive, which certainly provided grounds for her arrest.